Recently, I've been on a quest to watch Ryan Gosling movies because growing up, I've never really seen his movies like that. I just know that he's a very big established actor since I was a kid. But now that I'm older and I want to get into film more, I've been trying to watch and catch up on most of the films that he has such a monumental role in. And with that being said, the movies that I've seen of his is The Place Beyond Pines, which I liked, Drive, which to me is also a great film considering he rarely had any lines in that film, and also how his character builds up throughout the film. I might talk about that one day. And I've also seen Crazy Stupid Love, which is also great because it's a strong representation of how rom-coms are supposed to be, especially looking at the rom-coms that have been produced recently. But one day, I randomly come across an independent film that Ryan Gosling stars in called Half Nelson, not knowing what to expect. But after watching the film, it was one of those moments where I looked at an actor different because of the role they played was so different to me because of the previous roles I watched him partake in. After watching the movie, I personally came to the conclusion that it's his most interesting role in my opinion because of the message I walked away with. And one more thing, before anyone asks and before we get more into the video, I want to say, yes, I haven't fucking seen The Notebook, okay? A lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, you haven't seen The Notebook yet? Out of all the movies you mentioned by Ryan Gosling, you haven't seen The Notebook? Yes, I haven't seen that shit, okay? I'm sorry. That motherfucker didn't pop up in my head. I know that's one of his most monumental roles and one of his important roles, and people have a fucking cult fan base for that fucking movie. They say it makes them cry. I still haven't seen that shit. I'll let y'all know when I see it. Okay, I'll probably make a video when I let y'all know when I see that shit. But for now, I haven't seen that shit. So shut the fuck up, please. Shut up, please. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Half Nelson is a film written by Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden, and directed by Ryan Fleck as well. And the two main characters in the movie are Dan Dune, played by Ryan Gosling, and Dre, played by Sharika Epps. Dan is a history teacher and a girls basketball coach who teaches and coaches in the inner city of Brooklyn, New York. And he has an addiction to illicit drugs and struggles to get his love life intact. And the way he teaches is non-traditional according to the syllabus. So instead of teaching the traditional way, he uses more of a relatable approach so the kids in class can understand the topic he's discussing easier. And what I mean by that is he uses his personality in a funny, joking way sometimes while teaching. And teaching that way ultimately resulted in the students involve themselves more in the discussion of the topics he presented them, resulting in the students to getting a liking to him. So I would say Dan as a teacher and a coach doesn't reflect his personal life until one day, the girls' locker room, he gets caught up in one of the stalls smoking crack by his student Dre. And she stands there unfazed, showing no emotion because I'm pretty sure this is normal to her, just growing up in the environment she lived in. But after that happens, Dan and Dre form this odd and weird relationship. And basically the observation of the relationship is Dan tries to act as the older person with wisdom, trying to influence the younger person who is Dre to steer her life in the right direction. Because Dan sees that Dre is just like any other young black child who lives in the hood. She's in a broken home, raised by a single mother, no father figure, and on top of that, her older brother Mike is in jail for selling drugs for a local drug dealer named Frank, who is played by Anthony Mackie. And now Frank feels like he owes Mike's family protection due to the situation with her brother. But at the same time, Frank is trying to use Dre to sell his drugs, just like her brother did for him. Now Frank and Dan are kind of playing the same role of the older person with influence, kind of trying to be a father figure to Dre in a sense. But Dan can sense there is something wrong with Dre being around Frank. So he tries to step in and quote unquote save Dre so she doesn't ruin her life as a young kid. And that sums up the movie pretty much. While watching the movie, I couldn't help but to look at Dan displaying savior complex tendencies with his relationship with Dre, because there's just certain things that don't add up on a common sense level to me. And to explain what I mean by that, I'm just talking about how throughout the film, it seems like Dan is taking no accountability for his problems that he is struggling with within himself. And a great example of that is in one scene with his ex-girlfriend, she states that she went to rehab for her drug addiction, just like he has, and got married and ultimately changing her life for the better. But Dan, on the other hand, doesn't think rehab will help anything, rejecting the idea that his life will be better without drugs for himself and the people around him. And when I mean people, I'm mainly referring to the woman he deals with in this movie, because I'm pretty sure drugs have a big effect on how badly he treats the woman. And another thing I want to touch on, which may not be intentional, but it comes off like that, is Dan being white and asserting his whiteness as it pertains to protecting Dre in situations. And a great example of what I'm talking about is when Dan finds out who Frank is. Because there's certain scenes in the movie where Dan tries to assert his whiteness over Frank. And a great example is the scene where Frank and Dan confront each other. And the line that sticks out is,
That? Oh, so now we're back to the point of what is white is right, right? So,
This has nothing to do with
no,
that. and you
It's
know
good
it.
for Dre to have somebody like you looking out for Mr. Model A1 fucking citizen.
I don't know.
Dan throughout the film makes it seem like what Frank is doing, which is still bad because he's still trying to get a young black girl to sell his drugs. So Frank is still part of the problem. But at the same time, two things can be true at once. Because if you really look at the movie and watch the movie, Dan is not as moral as he thinks he is. He might just be just as bad or even worse than Frank. Because think about it. Dre is in a lose-lose situation because one person is trying to use her to sell drugs and the other person is the one doing drugs and getting the drugs from black neighborhoods like where Dre is from, but also trying to protect her, which is hypocritical and condescending because Dan is still part of the problem no matter how much he thinks he can affect Dre's life in a positive way. So in my opinion, there is no better influence in Dre's life besides her mother. That's why I said in the beginning of this video, I think it's Ryan Gosling's most interesting role I've seen so far because you can come away with two perspectives about this film and the message it's trying to convey. But before I'm done with this observation, can we all agree that no grown-ass man shouldn't have a relationship with a little girl like this in the first place? And I don't care what nobody says, that's just out of pocket. Like, nigga, you too grown to be around this little girl, bro. Like, nigga, what are you doing? Like, bro, you a grown-ass man. To conclude my thoughts on this video about the film, I just want to say just because I noticed the hypocrisy throughout the film doesn't mean I don't think the film is good. I think that's what makes the film actually good because in my opinion, the acting in this movie, especially by Ryan Gosling, is great because it shows the flaws in white people that are in marginalized communities / neighborhoods that think just because they're saving a person of color or trying to be a strong influence to people of color, in this case, which is a young black girl, they're doing something good. But in reality, they are part of the problem because they think they know what's best and don't actually engage in these communities. You know what I'm saying? They think of the problems but don't think of a solution. At the end of the day, they don't understand that people of color will always have problems that white people will never likely tend to go through due to how minorities are looked at in this country. And when I mean country, I'm referring to America, by the way. And plus, let's be for real. I don't think a teacher and a coach who is a drug addict and struggles with internal issues with no desire to fixing them has a capability to make a severe change in a young black girl's life who was lost in the first place anyways. You know what I'm saying? Like, bro, that nigga is like behind the scenes. Maybe he's a good teacher, but I mean, he's still fucked up behind the scenes, man. So I don't think he would make a severe change in Dre's life. So that's just my opinion. You know what I'm saying? Because he's the one, like I said, he's the one doing the drugs. He's the one getting the drugs from black neighborhoods. So, I mean, that's how I feel. And, yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about the movie. It's a good movie if you go see it. You know what I'm saying? It's a good movie. Go see it. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Without further ado, see you on the next video.